happy to welcome Professor Winter, the Director of the Center for the Study of Rationality here in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Professor Winter received his PhD on game theory here in the Hebrew University. He is the holder of the Fielder Prize Chair in Economics and former Chairman of the Economics Department. Professor Winter's academic study focuses on microeconomic theory, game theory, finance, experimental and behavioral economics, and industrial organization. Today, Professor Winter will tell us about mental equilibrium and rational emotion.
Thank you, Hagit. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and meet some friends. I've been working indeed in the area, in the borderline, in the interface between game theory and behavioral economics. This is a field which is partly theoretical, based on game theory, but partly experimental. And in recent years, in the last 3 to 4 years, I've been addressing questions. I was trying to explain, to build a game theory foundation to explain emotions. And you people know a lot about emotion, I assume, and what it does in our brain, and what are the mechanisms that generate it. But I want to think about emotions in my context in a strategic kind of reasoning. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a phenomenon that we'll see very short, that is puzzling to some extent. And then I'm going to discuss some experiments that people did which are related to this phenomenon. I'm going to describe a model, a game theoretic model, that builds on this notion of what I call mental equilibrium as a solution concept, is a game theoretic solution concept that attempt to explain the phenomena that I'm going to show you through the idea of emotion. While doing it, I'm going to formalize emotions, not from a neurological point of view, but from a strategic point of view. And then I'm going to talk, if I have some time, I'm going to talk about my own experiments that I've conducted. I'm collaborating with some psychologists and psychiatrists, with Rich Epstein and with Gershon Ben Shachar and other people in trying to bring the theory into some sort of verification through experiments. Okay? So let me start with a very short video. This is a game. I'm going to show you a very short video game, a very short video clip that is based on a television game which is very popular in the United Kingdom called Split or Steal. There is a similar version in the States called Friends and Foe. And I think the game speaks for itself.
This is serious, life-changing money. Your jackpot today is £100,150. You have one final decision to make. Easy decision. We're now going to play Split or Steal. I know you're the last 2 people in the country I have to explain this to, but you have 2 final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150 and you go home with £50,075. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with £100,150. And the person who chooses the split ball goes home with nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing. Okay. Before I ask you to choose, I want you to look at your two golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steel ball. This is very important. Make sure you don't show each other. Before I ask you to choose, I think you have some talking to do to each other.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to split that much.
I am going to split this. That's 50,000. I'm just, it's unbelievable. I'm very, very happy to go on with 50,000.
Only going to split.
If I stole off you, every single person there would run over here and lynch me.
There was no way I could, I mean, everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stole.
When people watch this, they're not going to believe it.
Please.
I can look you in the, Sarah, I can look you straight in the eye and tell you I am going to split. I swear down to you, I am going to split.
Okay. This is serious money.
It is.
Sarah, Steve, choose either the split or the steel ball now. Hold it up.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. And I'm going to run a very short survey. How many of you seeing this believe that she is going to choose steel? Okay. How many think she's going to choose split? Okay, so you're split yourself. Okay. How about him? How many think he's going to choose steel? Okay. How about split? Okay, so let's see what happens.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steel?
I think many of you made the correct guess. Now, this experiment was this game, as I said, triggered some interest by game theorists and economists. And one of our students, one of my students, Einav Hart, was actually did one of the experiments. And actually, you may be speculating whether it's at all possible to predict. Turns out that people do manage to predict to some extent what these two players are going to, how these two players are going to play. Okay, there is a certain there is a certain ability. This ability is substantially proved if we are motivating them with prizes. Okay. And it's surprisingly what we recently have done. We try to check the effect of oxytocin on this ability. Okay, because we know that oxytocin generate. There are already many experiments that show that oxytocin can increase the amount of trust among individuals. There are lots of trust experiments that were conducted with the use of this hormone. And what turned out to be the case that oxytocin substantially diminishes the ability to predict correctly in this game. So you are initially paying little attention just because your suspicious is going down substantially. There were two other experiments with two other researchers that concern me more than these two, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. There's one that was conducted by a finance and game theorist person by the name of Avner Kalai from Iowa University. He was actually looking at a similar game in the state, which is called Friends and Foe. And he asked himself, how do the people that play this game make their decision? Okay, and he collected thousands of, probably hundreds of this kind of decisions by individuals who face. By the way, before they are actually playing split or steal, there is a preliminary stage where they participate in a trivia game, and they collect this money, these 100,000 pounds that they collected. It's a joint effort by both of them, and it has to be split. Okay, the foe and friends game looks very much the same. And by the way, for those of you who haven't noticed, I'm going to use game theory, but I'm going to use rather basic game theory. The only thing that I hope you heard about is this notion of Nash equilibrium. I will, in case some of you do not know that, when I reach the stage, I'm going to slightly elaborate on this. But for those who took, who had any contact with game theory, this game that was played here is a prisoner's dilemma. It's a very famous game. It's a game where players have dominant strategy. It always pays off to choose steal, because if the other guy is choosing steal, then you're not going to get anything anyhow, regardless of what you choose, whether you choose steal or split. If the other guy is choosing split, then of course you're way better off at choosing steal, because then you get the 100,000 instead of 50,000. So no matter what the other guy is doing, you're always better off choosing steal. Now what Avner Kalai did, he was asking himself the following question. Let's look at this matrix where we have two actions for each individual, D for defect and C for cooperate. D for defect, player 1 is choosing rows and player 2 is choosing columns, D and C, okay? And let's put inside the proportion of the entries. You know, what's the proportion of the game that were played DD? Let's call it alpha DD. What's the proportion of the games that were played DC, okay? Alpha, DC, alpha. I'm going to answer your questions. Alpha CD and alpha CC. Yes?
Usually in the game theory, the prisoner's dilemma, they're not allowed to talk. In this case,
they're allowed, yeah. Usually they're not allowed to talk. Here they're allowed to talk, and this makes this game completely different than the usual prisoner's dilemma. And then he asked himself, probably people are using mixed strategies. So people are choosing a certain probability by which they are choosing to defect and to cooperate, and the other guy is also choosing whether to defect and to cooperate. Maybe they are sort of mentally toss a coin in their mind before making this decision. If this is the case, then these four numbers that I inserted here in this matrix must be a probability distribution generated by a product. Okay, it must be coming from some marginal probabilities for each player. However, what he managed to show is that these four numbers are never a probability distribution coming from a product. In fact, you cannot find a probability for choosing B and C for player 1 and a probability of choosing D and C of player 2 in such a way that if they toss the coins independently, we'll get these four numbers here. And in fact, what more specifically what he found out, that most of the weight is generated on the diagonal. Okay? Okay? Menachem Yaari, my colleague from the Rationality Center, did a similar experiment, only that he didn't do it, he didn't took data from a game. He actually implemented the game in the lab, in the ratio lab in Mount Scopus. And what he did, he gave individuals to play the prisoner's dilemma, the real prisoner's dilemma, without speaking with each other, but just looking at each other's face. Okay? So they could not communicate. They just looked at each other's face, and he found the same phenomenon. Most of the weight was concentrated on the diagonal. Okay? To a certain extent, you know, the way I interpret, this is like mind reading, right? You read the mind of the other guy. If the other guy is about to play D, if he's about to play steal, your chances of playing steal are higher. Okay? If he's about to play C, you will play C with a higher probability. So this is a quite surprising finding. The other finding that Avner Kalai was founding, and also I think Menachem Yaari, is that you know, we game theorists, People think that we can make advices about how to play games. Usually we can't. But there is only one case in which we are pretty confident to say something. And that's when you have a dominant strategy. When a player has a dominant strategy, when a player has a strategy which is the best, regardless of what the other player is doing, he'd better use it. Surprisingly, what Avner Kalai was founding and what Menachem Yavin was founding is that that's not the case. In fact, if you look at the conditional expected payoff for this player, conditional on that you played C and not D, or conditional on that you cooperated, you choose split, then your expected payoff with choosing split were higher than those people who were choosing steal. How can it be? I mean, we just said that choosing steal is a dominant strategy. Well, it can happen, and it does happen because of this correlation here. Okay, it happens because whenever you choose steal, whenever you decide to choose steal, okay, it affects the probability that the other guy will choose steal. So the other guy is sort of is able to make some sort of prediction about what's the likelihood that you'll play steal or split. He or she behaves upon this likelihood, and consequently we get this diagonal effect, and also we get the fact that if you are playing steal, you're probably going to encounter a high probability of steal by the other guy, which will make you worse off. Okay, so this is the observation, and I want to suggest to you a model which is or an explanation which is built on a model of mental equilibrium, and then perhaps support this model with some other experiment that I conducted myself with associates, with friends and co-authors. Okay, so let me, yeah.
There's not a significant difference from the original game because this game, the both this loser gets nothing, whereas the original game there is some reward.
The game differs from the original game only in this indifference, right? That here you are indifferent between, if you know that the other guy is choosing steal, you are indifferent between choosing steal and split. In the original prisoner's dilemma, you're always better off choosing steal, okay? And but from a practical point of view, of course, if you believe that the other guy is going to choose steal, most of us will tend to want to choose steal as well. You don't want to feel the sucker. He chose steal and you are ending with split. Yes.
Is there a cultural dependence that some strategies are more cooperative?
This we know from other experiments. Yeah, we know from other experiments. There are a lot of literature on multicultural experiments, and we are not posing well, Israelis, on these experiments, unfortunately. That's an issue for another talk. As a public. Okay. So let me tell you about rational emotion. Rational emotion, the idea about rational emotion is coming from the notion of commitment. Behavioral economics for years has treated the emotions in a very both behavioral economics and game theory in a negative way. Basically, emotions are phenomena that are driving us away from rational decision making, and we tend to be punished for behaving emotionally. Okay. And this obviously is correct to many strategic situations, but there is another face to emotion which I wanted to highlight in this paper, which is that emotions are facilitating, to some extent, some of our rational decision making. Okay, and they do so primarily in cases of interactive situations, because emotions are also mechanisms by which we manage to make commitment. And as we know, game theorists know that commitment is very crucial aspect in strategic decision making. Let me tell you what I refer to. Let's take anger, for instance. Okay, so let me give you an example. This is one example, the flight cancellation. I have two examples. I'll try to be short on them. Suppose that you are on your way. Imagine you are on your way to a conference and you're being notified at the airport that your flight was canceled without much reasons, and you are asked to go home and report a day later. Okay? Now let me take you through two different scenarios of this story. In scenario A, what you see around you is the passengers are pretty calm, pretty apathic about the situation. They are announcing that buses are waiting outside to take you to the hotel, and the passengers are slowly crowding away from the terminal. And you probably will not feel. You may feel frustrated. You may feel disappointed, but most likely you won't feel very angry about the situation. Now, imagine in contrast that you encounter a friend of yours that was supposed to be on the same flight, and he or she tells you that, you know what, I went to the desk of the airline, and I in a very determined and assertive way, I explained them that I need to be on this conference, and there's no way I'm going to go back home. And if they don't accommodate me, I'm going to sue. And I was very angry about the situation. If they don't accommodate me, I said I'm going to sue the company. The situation now is going to be completely different than the first one. Most likely, you will be angry. Okay. You'll be angry. You'll approach the airline desk asking for some treatment. You'll be assertive yourself. It's not that you'll fake being angry. You will actually be angry. And being angry in this kind of situation is a mechanism to generate commitment, right? Because if you are about to threaten to sue the company, you'd better look very pissed off about the situation, because everybody knows that it involves a lot of costs, both financially and in terms of time to sue the company. But being angry is sort of sending the signal that I'm so much pissed off about the situation, I'm willing to bear these costs in order to get my revenge on the company, or get the right thing, to do the right thing, right? So anger, in many strategic situations, many interactive situations, is serving as a mechanism, as a device to make commitment credible. Okay. There's other side to rational emotions. 3 years ago, I was asked to give an interview to the Al Jazeera TV channel, and they came to the Rationality Center and interviewed me over an hour. They had a reportage on Israeli academics, and they asked really a lot of questions. And at some stage, they got into more personal questions. They started with academics, with the Rationality Center, with our Nobel laureate, and at some stage they wanted to know where I'm coming from, and who are my parents, and how did they got to be in Israel, okay? And I recall that before giving this interview, I asked myself, why do I do it? What's in it for me? The answer was that if I'm able to influence even marginally public opinion among Arab viewers, that's my payoff. That's the benefit that I get from this interview. And when they started asking about my parents, I told them the story about my father, which I told dozens of times before to friends and relatives. Never got too much excited about it. I told them about the way my father escaped from Germany when the Nazis took over, and he had to wander as a kid through different countries of Europe until he found his way to that time Palestine, and was an orphan in Palestine trying to survive to do all sorts of jobs in order to survive. And I told this story so many times without being excited at all. It was just in front of Al Jazeera TV that I couldn't hold my tears. This is rational emotion. This was not faking. This was clearly not faking. This was an emotional situation that was triggered by incentives. And incentives here is the punchline. Okay, we often are able to generate emotional states because they serve us well. Okay, and that's the basic that's the basic idea, and I'm going to formalize it. And if I have time, I'm going to show you an experiment on rational emotion about generating emotion by incentive that I did with Gershon Ben Shachar and one of my students. But I'll address questions first.
But the ability to fake emotions would also be an evolutionary mechanism that might be used.
Right, and of course. So there are two forces here, two evolutionary forces. One being able to generate genuine emotion, and there's also an evolutionary process for you to be able to detect whether the other guy is faking or. And this will all come into the model. Okay, so detection is not going to be perfect, right? Okay, yes. Yes. I have just half an hour. Okay, so I'm sorry. I will address question later. Okay, so here is the notion. I'm going to go a little bit fast, but not too fast. So here is the idea. Players are born endowed with material and selfish preferences. You know, one of the things that behavioral economics is doing wrongly in the last several years is trying to explain the discrepancy between game theory and actual behavior by attributing players or individual preferences like venge and fairness and this kind of thing, without trying to ask the question, where is it coming from? One of the purposes of this example is to endogenize preferences, to be able to ask why people behave, why people are venging, why people are developing faction or fairness or whatever. Okay, so the benchmark is material preferences. This is what individuals care about. They care about think about it, about food, about survival probability, about fitness. Okay, but in addition, when they engage in interaction with other people, they develop preferences which may not be consistent with their material preferences. Okay, they may develop preferences for inequality aversion. They may develop preferences for greed or for spitefulness. Okay, but these preferences, okay, I call them social preferences. Okay. Now, when these preferences may depend on the strategic environment in which they operate, who are you playing, your mood, and lots of other things. And now these preferences and your behavior have to form together an equilibrium. And this is the basic idea. What is an equilibrium? An equilibrium is a situation in which what you do is the best response to what the other person does, and what the other person does is the best response to what you do. Okay, that's roughly the concept of equilibrium. But let me make it a little bit more formal. Okay, so these preferences that I call mental preferences have to satisfy the following property. The strategic interaction is resulting with a Nash equilibrium. So they play a Nash equilibrium but they play it with respect to the mental state, the mental preferences, the psychological preferences. Okay, this is one thing. The other thing, and this is the most important aspect of this concept, these psychological preferences are not arbitrary. They themselves have to be best response to the psychological preferences of the person that you are interacting with. Okay, so here is a sense in which they have to be best response. Each player mental state must be a best response to the mental state of the other, in the sense that no player can unilaterally change his mental states in such a way that by me changing my mental state, the strategic environment becomes such that it admits another equilibrium, okay, with respect to my new mental states, that treats me better in terms of my material preferences, okay? Okay, so if I'm playing with Danny, I have a mental state, and Danny has a mental state, and there should be two conditions that have to be satisfied for us to play a mental equilibrium. First, we play, each of us, with respect to our mental state, mental preferences, and mental preferences are just the payoffs in the game, okay? And in addition, okay, so we form an equilibrium in our mental state, and in addition, my mental state have to be best response to Danny's mental state, okay? I cannot choose a different mental state that will give rise to a different strategic environment that will get me more point in terms of my material preferences, in terms of the probability of survival, okay? In terms of the food that I'm getting. Okay, let me just put this into a formal definition. It's not, don't be intimidated by it, but I do want to make it. So when we talk about games, we talk about situation in which, we have a set of individual, we have set of strategies for each individual, and these together are combined into what we call a set of strategy profile. And we have utility functions. These are functions that map strategy profile into payoffs for these individuals, okay? But here I'm going to make distinction between what I call material preferences, these are the capital U's, and mental preferences that I denote by small u, okay? Okay, so we have material preferences, this part of the description of the game, and mental preferences would be part of the definition of the equilibrium, okay? And I'll define it very, very soon, in just a second. Just one notation, whenever I have a game, NE of G is the set of Nash equilibrium of the game G, okay? So here is the definition. It's not a complicated definition. So I'm going to define mental equilibrium. What is a mental equilibrium? It's a strategy profile in a game. Okay. What does this strategy profile has to satisfy? It has to satisfy two conditions. First of all, this strategy profile has to be a Nash equilibrium with respect to the mental preferences. There are some mental preferences with respect to which S forms a Nash equilibrium. Okay? Secondly, is that these mental preferences have to be optimal. Okay? And this second condition speaks about the optimality of the mental states. It says there exists no player I, a mental state UI prime, a different mental state, so think about me changing my mental state, and a strategy profile S prime, such that S prime is again a Nash equilibrium, but not in the original game. It's a Nash equilibrium now in the game where I changed my mental state. So there cannot be such a case in which, by changing my mental state, I'm making myself better off with respect to my material preferences. Okay? Okay? Let me give you an example. I'm going to talk, this is the prisoner's dilemma. Okay? This is the prisoner's dilemma. And as you see, the prisoner's dilemma has only one Nash equilibrium, which is playing D, right? Because playing D is better for me, regardless as player 1, regardless what player 2 is doing. I'm getting 1 versus, if I'm playing D, I'm getting 1 here and 5 here, and if I'm playing C, I'm getting 0 here and 4 here, okay? So this is the only Nash equilibrium here. However, I'm going to convince you that cooperating, we can't cooperate without emotions. I'm going to show you how we are able to sustain the cooperation outcome as a mental equilibrium, okay? So to show that, I have to show you a set of mental preferences that will support CC as a mental equilibrium, okay? And I wrote these mental preferences here, okay? What should be my mental preference? If you look at these mental preferences are very clear interpretation. The property of these mental preferences is that we are reciprocity seeking. We suffer a lot from any situation in which I did something else than the other guy. Whenever I do C and the other guy does D, we get a very low payoff, -1. Okay, so I hate to choose D when the other guy is choosing C, and I hate to choose C when the other guy is choosing D. But any other choice which give us the same outcomes, like CC and DD, we are getting the same payoff. Our mental preferences, our mental payoff is just identical to the material payoff. Okay? Yes?
On your system, where does the hate come from? Why do I hate the fact that...
I'll answer. Let me just give this example. Let's explain this example and address where the emotions are coming from. Okay? So, why is 4-4 a mental equilibrium? Okay, so what I have to show, first of all, I have to show that with respect to these mental preferences, 4-4 is a Nash equilibrium. And this is clear, because if I do something else, if we're playing CC and I deviate, I'm getting -1, which is worse. Okay? The second thing I have to show is that if I change unilaterally my mental payoff, I cannot make myself better off in terms of the material payoffs. I cannot get more than 4. Well, how can I get more than 4 by changing my mental state? The only number here which can give me more than 4 is 5. How can I get 5? I can get 5, for instance, by choosing a mental state that drives me to choose D, regardless of what the other person is doing, okay? But what will happen if I do something like that? The other guy has this mental preference. He would avoid a situation in which we play DC. If he thinks that I'm going to play D, he would deviate. He would deviate, and the outcome that we'll end up getting is 1-1, okay? So I cannot get anything better than 4-4 by means of changing my mental state. I have more general result that says in a class of games, okay? In a larger class of games that include both the chicken game, the prisoner's dilemma game, and many other games, I can address the question, what are the mental states that will support cooperation? All these games have some notion of cooperation and behaving cooperatively and behaving non-cooperatively. And it's an interesting question to ask, what are all the mental states that will support a mental equilibrium in which people will play cooperation in these games, okay? Putting it differently, what kind of psychological state of mind should be individuals in order to be able to interact in such a way that they will eventually play cooperation? And I can characterize all these preferences, and the conclusion is that the only thing that the common property of all these preferences, all these mental preferences that drives people to play cooperation in this class of games is the property of reciprocity. Reciprocity is the key property. Namely, what is reciprocity? Reciprocity is just preferring to choose C on D when the other guy is choosing C, but preferring to choose D when the other guy is choosing D. Okay? So now let me, you ask, where does anger or hate is coming from? You want to make distinction between hate and anger, or are you asking also about anger?
I want to understand under the system, why is it that I hate being in that situation? Where does reciprocity come from? What is the meaning of it?
Well, the way I'm thinking about it is that there are mechanisms that generate, probably evolutionary mechanism, that generate emotional state in many situations, not in all situations. And by the way, evolution doesn't work efficiently. We know all that when we have a pain. You know, pain is a very important evolutionary mechanism to protect ourselves. But sometimes we have pain when when it's clear to us what we have, and yet we suffer. Okay, and likewise with emotions. Some of the emotions in some of the situations are serving us, because they affect our action, and they affect the other person's action when he encounters our state of mind. Okay, and anger and hate could arise as a mechanism to make sure that you avoid contacting to somebody, because this person can be harmful to you. Okay, so there's a mechanism that generates hate that trigger you to stay away from the guy. Anger is triggered by a mechanism that facilitate commitment in many strategic situations. Yes, there was.
No, I mean, I
Okay.
urge you to go on unless.
Okay.
If you
So
keep the question
yeah,
for the-
I'll address yours. And
Would you ascribe the same kind of emotions to nations rather than?
it's already taking us far away. But it's
Try to keep the question to the end, because
okay.
it seems so interesting.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do, am I going to say something about the story that I'm going to go back to Splitter Steel, and I'm going to try to amend the model in such a way that it will allow me to explain the story here. So here, that's the game of prisoner's dilemma that I want to play this aspect. I want to explain this aspect of correlation that we see in the split and steel game. Okay, and the story is the following. So I have to amend the model to a model of mental equilibrium without full observation. This is the question that I was asked earlier. Okay, I want you to think about these two individuals that are when they start engaging in the discussion, they develop a state of mind. And I'm not getting into the question, what is the mechanism? What happens? You know, what's the machine that generates this state of mind? They are endowed with a state of mind that's supposed to satisfy some equilibrium condition. Okay, and the bottom line is these equilibrium conditions. Okay, so I'm endowed with a state of mind, and Dan is endowed with a state of mind. Now, when we are endowed in a state of mind, it is the case that we cannot perfectly recognize or detect the state of mind of the other person. Okay? So the only thing that I get, if you are endowed in a state of mind, I'm getting a signal from your state of mind. And the signal is noisy. Okay? So I can, if you were seeing your signal, I can be correct with interpreting it only with probability p. So with probability 1 minus p, I'm guessing incorrectly. Okay? For both, I'm making both type 1 and type 2 mistakes of probability p. Okay? So now what happens? Okay? I'm endowed with a state of mind. Dan is endowed in a state of mind. And I'm figuring out in what state of mind he is. Okay? And depending on the state of mind that he is, depending on the signal that I'm getting, I have to act. And my strategy now is act as a function of the signal that you got. Do something if you think that the other guy is going to be nice to you, and do something else if you think that the other guy is going to be hostile to you. Okay? And that's the way you behave. And now the question comes: how does the state of mind that I started with arise? And the answer is this state of mind arises through the equilibrium condition. So it must be the case that if it's not a dominant strategy to be in a hostile state of mind or in a good state of mind, if there are forces to both sides, if it's a probability, if it's a mixed strategy, if the optimal strategy in terms of the state of mind is a mixed strategy, then it must be the case that given my ability to recognize the state of us, the state of mind of the other, the expected payoff that I get in terms of my material preferences is maximized through this choice of state of mind. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to compute the expected payoff that I get in terms of my real interests. Okay, given the noisiness that I experience in terms of interpreting the other person's state of mind, and a strategy of choosing a state of mind has to satisfy the condition that I cannot change the probability by which I'm choosing to be hostile or to befriend in such a way that eventually, given the interaction and given what the other person is doing, I'm going to get a higher payoff in terms of my material preferences. This is a very clear game theoretic approach to explain the emergence of state of mind. And I won't have time to get into all the details, but what it boils down to, and I can, if you want, I can send you the slides. What it boils down to is that there are going to be two states of minds here. Okay, there's going to be one state of mind in which I'm irrational. A rational guy means that I'm going to play defect regardless of what the signal I see from the other guy. And the other state of mind, which I call reciprocal. Okay, reciprocal guy is a guy in which if he detects a signal of reciprocity from the other guy, will choose himself also to be nice. But if he detects a signal from the other guy which is going to play defect, he will also play defect. Okay? And the question is, what is the probability P, or Q, sorry, by which I have to choose whether to be a D guy or a C guy, or a reciprocal guy or a rational guy, in such a way that this will maximize my expected payoff vis-a-vis the other guy. Okay, so it boils down to equations. Okay, and unfortunately I won't have time to show it. It boils down to equations. This is the expected payoff. P is the probability that I detect correctly. The Q is the probability that I am a reciprocal guy, and this is what I'm expecting to get if player one is choosing, if I'm choosing being reciprocal with probability 1, and when I equate these expressions, I find out that when my detection probability is 3/4, for instance, I will play reciprocity with probability 1/2. Okay, and I can actually explicitly. This is the function that tells me, given the level of accuracy that I have in detecting the other person state of mind, what's the probability that I'm choosing being reciprocal or not? And I can plan this probability eventually into the matrix and ask myself, in equilibrium, what's the chances that I'm going to play CC? Both of us. What's the chances that we are going to play DD, both of us? These are the numbers that arise whenever the probability of detecting correctly is 3/4. And if you look at this matrix, you'll see that it has exactly the correlation structure that this matrix has. Okay? it has we are able because there is some probability by which we can detect the other person. We generate in equilibrium. We generate correlation. Okay, this is what I referred to earlier to mind reading. Okay, not only that, I can compute the expected payoff that a player who is choosing conditional on choosing C. What is your expected payoff? Conditional choosing D, what is your expected payoff? And for some values of P, I can show that playing C in the prisoner's dilemma will get you a higher expected payoff in mental equilibrium. Although playing D is a dominant strategy from a pure game theoretic point of view. Yes. But eventually, there are values Q and P for which it's going to be a fixed point. My best response is going to be my Q is going to be best respond to your Q, and your Q is going to be best respond to my Q. Okay, that's what we show. Okay. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So now I have 5 minutes if I'm not wrong, or slightly less. Okay. I'm very briefly. I'm going to tell you something about the experiment that we did. What we wanted to show is whether incentive can generate emotions. There is a very famous game called the dictator game in economics that has been played hundreds of times, and this is basically a game of donation. Okay, the game of donation. You are given a certain amount of money, and you are asked. You can take all the money for yourself, or you can donate part of it to the other person. Okay, it's up to you. Usually, people donate about 20%. Okay, what we did, we wanted to see whether by incentive we can affect the mental state or the emotion of the other person. And what we were concerned not about those who make the offers, but those who respond to the offer, who receive the offer. And for those people, we connected them to something I'm sure you know, which is called skin conductance, that measures emotional reactions to humidity and heartbeats. And we generated three treatments. Treatment one, which we called anger, we told subjects that we have a way to find out or to measure their emotional reaction to the offers that they get from the sender, okay? And the offers are between 0 and 100. And if we found that they are angry about low offers, we are going to boost their payoff, okay? This was treatment one. Treatment two, we said we have a way to measure your happiness about high offers. Previously, we talked about low offer. Now we are talking about high offers. And if we find that you are satisfied with high offer, we're going to even boost your payoff further. And treatment three was just the control. We just let them play the standard game. Of course, we measure the emotional reaction, but we did not trigger them to anything. And I can show you one. I think I'll have time to show you just one graph. Okay, this is not the one I want to see. Okay, well, maybe I'll show you two. What we see is that the anger. This is the amount of reaction that we got. This, as you may know, is measured both by means of amplitude and latency. And what we see that the overall reaction, emotional reaction in the angry condition. The calm and the happy are pretty much the same. But more interesting is this figure, which shows that the difference between low offers and high offers in all these three treatments. Calm is blue, red is angry, and happy is green. And we see that low offer, the reaction, the highest spike here is in the angry condition under low offers, okay? They don't seem to be very much angry when they get high offers, but they don't seem to be angry when they get low offers in both the calm condition and the happy condition, okay? They don't seem to be very much happy when they are incentivized in the happy condition to become happy. So it is, when they get high offers, their emotional reaction is slightly higher than that of the angry treatment, but it's not significant, okay? So eventually what we can see is that it's very easy to trigger people to become angry. And the way that there's all sorts of mechanisms to become angry. One very effective one is to think of something that made you very angry in the past. But it actually triggers you from any objective point of view. It triggers an emotional reaction. I mean, it's completely indistinguishable when you think of something angry that happened to you. Maybe that's something that we will be able to see better with fMRI or other techniques that the neuroscience people have. But the emotional reaction by remembering something, by thinking about an emotional situation, it actually triggers you to feel the emotion quite authentically. This is, by the way, how actors get themselves into act. When they cry on the stage, they don't fake crying; they actually cry. They're actually endowed with the emotion, with the emotion of sadness, and the way they do it, they recollect a sad situation and try to endow themselves into thinking deeply about this situation. Okay? This result also suggests that this appeared in a journal called Social Neuroscience that specializes in neuroscience finding that connects to social phenomenon. One thing that we can see with this graph is that there was not one way to see that the emotion was authentic and they did not try to cheat the machine is to note that they couldn't if they knew how to cheat the machine. They would have used it also in the happy condition. Well, as we see, there was not much of a reaction in the happy condition, and there was a huge reaction in the anger condition. This may suggest that it's easier to trigger ourselves to be angry than trigger ourselves to be happy. Happiness is probably more difficult thing to endow ourselves into, and maybe it's coming from the fact that anger is much more effective for daily purposes. And being angry is much more effective emotion than being happy. Just happiness just puts you into indifference, into apathy. Thank you. Yeah, please.
I have 2 points in my
Speak up.
Well, first of all, about distance, you have this slide. It's possible that what you're showing here connects to your other part, is that our expectations from our colleagues is that they'll give us a fair share of what they just received. Therefore, I'm not terribly happy about it.
No, but when I'm not incentivizing you, you are not reacting in an anger manner, right?
Right, because you told me that I should look, in other words, like what Simona just said, it's more a disappointment type reaction towards standards of collaboration rather than the difference between, because what you're showing here is the difference between emotions. Anger somehow ideological sense can happen,
Yes.
but it could be connected to the social standards.
Maybe because of the bias you create. Well, you're thinking about the bias that you create by the fact that you ask.
I'm thinking that your way of increasing happiness simply didn't work out. Whereas your way of increasing disappointment or anger did work out.
That's the
Not
result.
in terms of the difference between the emotions, but in terms of the strategy of increasing happiness.
Okay.
So there should be a different strategy or a
Okay.
different type of experiment in order to increase happiness.
Okay. That would be if you can think about a strategy like this, I would be very glad.
The more important one that I would like to ask you about is this material preference.
Yes.
There is evidence from child development from very young babies that deprivation of social contact is as detrimental to child development as deprivation of food.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
The consequences can be retardation.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple. So in other words, it's not the mental state in the service of material benefits, but the mental state that you were talking about of collaborating and being socially well with your comrades is as crucial as what you call material needs.
So there's another type of reward.
It's another type of. It's another type of reward.
Right, but it's critical to your definition of rationality. Rationality includes being social.
Yeah, but if you ask yourself why is it a type of reward, you can go back to the evolutionary explanation. Ask why do we, why do we feel we're stuck in a traffic jam and we want to.
Human babies die if they don't have love.
Yeah, exactly.
The same way they die if they don't have food. I mean, it's crucial for
Right.
survival, right? So in other words, the notion of rationality it has to include the type of behavior that gives you emotional satisfaction.
The emotional satisfaction is the outcome.
This matrix can reflect
Yeah.
social rewards as well.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it.
It's already in the it's already these material preferences may in themselves reflect those emotional. No, they did. If it's something that goes down to your survival, then you can incorporate them in the material preferences. Yes.
My question is completely the other side.
Yeah.
One of the functions you use the honesty in signaling. You have to have a signal that tells the other one something.
No, it's not a matter of honesty. It's a matter that you are limited in your way to fake your emotional state.
Yeah, that's an assumption.
That's an
Why
assumption.
would that have worked? We're talking about
No, I mean the assumption. Anything else would be an assumption. This is the non-assumption. Anything else would mean that you can perfectly fake your mental state, or perfectly detect the mental state of the other. I'm not assuming neither. Okay, I'm assuming that there is some ability to fake and there's some ability of detecting. How much it is depends on P.
But now, just a minute. Now, if you have a P, I have the benefit in this magical circumstance of lowering my P. I'm the only one who fakes better than the other.
But you are limited in how much you can do it. Not being able to control it fully is an assumption.
Don't allow me the strategy of changing my P.
No, you can change your P, but eventually you are ending up with some P.
No, I want to choose my P you're choosing P for everybody. I want to choose my P individually. You're not allowing me to do that.
Obviously, in many of these situations, you want to take the P as low as possible. From your point of view, you want to cheat me, right? And I'm saying, okay, you want to take your P as low as possible. There is some bound. You can't get it below a certain level. And if you say you can get it to zero, you can get P to zero. I ask you, where is this assumption is coming from? Assuming that you can get it down to zero is an assumption. Assuming that you are bounded somewhere away from them. Okay, so that's part of the P's don't have to be uniform over all individuals. Sorry?
That lady in your movie showed us that
Everybody may have different ability, and this is reflected by different characteristics of the P for different individuals. Different level of P's for different individuals. Yeah. Absolutely, yes.
The question of how much information do emotions convey is very low.
If P is very low, obviously emotions don't convey much. But my argument, and this is supported by the experiment that I mentioned at the early in my talk of Einav Hart, suggests that people can encounter to some degree the mental states of others. Okay, and this gives us some support to the idea that emotion play a role in strategic environments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.